Okay, this is the one that I've been dreading. I used to have this all set up because I had some notes that we used from a previous book, and they were the best notes in the world, but then we don't have a contract with them anymore, so I can't use those notes. So I will do my best here. This is this is one of the most difficult topics, I think, that you can start with anatomy and physiology. So if you don't understand it or you're frustrated by it, I get it. It is just like a really difficult concept. It combines a lot of things in, and it's a struggle to understand it. If you get it right away, like more power to you. Awesome. Great job. Big ups to you. If you didn't get it, you're good. You're with good company. You're a normal person. Like the first two times I learned this, I don't know what I was learning. I was just guessing and throwing out potassium, sodium, action potential, depolarization. Like, I was just saying words that didn't mean anything. So it's a difficult subject, but I'm going to try to break it down as easy as possible. So let's go ahead and talk about a few things. So the first thing that we need to discuss are essentially, what are we talking about here? And I think it starts with these words: action potential, resting, that's not an R, resting membrane potential, graded potential, local potential, right? Like, what the heck are we talking about here? Like potentials. That makes it, they should just call this like nerve conduction or nerve signal or electrical current. This is just resting the normal, like not firing nerve is the resting membrane potential. The state that it's in when it is not firing and it is resting. And then we'll talk about local and global potential or graded potentials when we talk about action potentials. So we're talking about nerve signal. And what do we mean by that? So what are we talking about with this? So let's give a practical example. I want to pick up my coffee, right? I don't have one here. I'm very sad about that. I want to pick up my coffee. What do I have to do? I got to get my muscles to fire to do that. Who is in control of that? That is my brain. My brain, and what motors or what, I already gave it away. What system, what division is involved in voluntary motor movement? Your somatic motor system. Now that starts up here in your noodle. It ends at that neuromuscular junction in your biceps. We're going to pick that up at the muscle. So how does it get from here to there? Well, a nerve, actually two nerves, are going to connect it. They're going to connect it from your brain all the way down your spinal cord and then out to your brachial plexus to that muscle. So how does information travel from my brain to my muscle? Well, how does you can think of nerves as electrical wires. So for example, por ejemplo, we've got this is my version of an iPhone here. It's got a case on it, right? Because I'm not a psychopath and just taking my phone out. You got to have a case on your phone. No offense to you crazy people walking around just nothing on your phone. You like my patients take that out and I just start getting sweaty hands. It's like you got a $1,200 phone. You're gonna get a case on that. So how do we charge our phone? Well, we have a wire like much like a nerve, and we're gonna have an electrical current that is gonna pass through this wire, and it's gonna go into our phone and charge our phone. Our nerves are almost the same thing, except in our bodies, we don't use a flow of electrons as an electrical current. We use bioelectricity. That sounds like a cool, fancy sci-fi word, right? Electricity. And all that is a current, which just means a flow like a river has a current of sodium ions. You're going to have a flow of sodium ions down our nerves. So here we go. Drawing our nerve here, right? All right. So we're trying to get a flow of ions down this axon of sodium ions. That is the goal here. So there are a bunch of steps that we've got to go through to get us there. but there are some things that we have to discuss prior to that to get us to that point. So the first thing that I want to talk about is just to review a couple of things. The first thing that we need to review is a gradient, right? Y'all remember gradients. It is the universe is always in motion. Everything is always moving unless it's at absolute zero. This table is moving. The air molecules are moving. My vocal cords are vibrating. But what determines how they move? Well, the rule of the universe is everything moves from high to low unless there's energy involved, right? So high to low, that's the natural state everything wants to go to. So remember like uh if we had a beaker of water and we dropped some red dye in it, all of it would accumulate down at the bottom. You come back a half hour later, all that red dye has spread out. If you had a beaker of water and you had a whole bunch of dissolved solutes on one side, eventually they would want to diffuse through the membrane and go to the other side until they hit equilibrium. So everything goes down this gradient. That's the first part. The second part is understanding the cell membrane. Neurons are a cell. They have a phosphobilipid layer for a membrane, right? Now, if you remember, or if you don't, we're going to go over it again. The phosphobilipid layer is selectively permeable, meaning it lets some things in, it lets some things out. What does it let in? Small molecules. It can diffuse right to O2, CO2 can dissolve in and out real easily, doesn't need anything else. Some fatty molecules, some small fatty molecules can get in. Hormones like T3 and T4, these are fat soluble things. They will diffuse right through the membrane because they're fats and lipids are fats. But what if we have something that's polar or charged, like a sodium ion, or like a potassium ion, or a chloride ion, or a calcium ion, or a glucose molecule that is hydrophilic and it's big. These cannot pass through in the membrane, or in potassium's case, out of the membrane. So, but we need to get these in. Because remember, what are we trying to do? We're trying to get an influx of sodium into the cell. So how do we solve this problem? Well, we've solved this problem by having things called channels. Now, when we're talking about channels, the thing that you have to realize is that we name the channels in two different ways. We name the channel for what flows through it. So if sodium flows through this channel, what's the name of the channel? It is a sodium channel. Easy peasy, right? If calcium flows through this channel, flows out, right? Or depending on where the gradient, right? So say it opens up and it goes through it. That's calcium. We had a calcium channel in our muscles, remember, in our sarcoplasmic reticulum. When the voltage changed there, calcium went out and it went to go bind to troponin and tropomyosin. If we had pizza that was traveling through the membrane, it would be a pizza channel. I want to go to that channel, right? We also name them for the way that, oh my God, okay, I just had to I have like PTSD. I swear to God, when I was recording it this morning and I forgot to record it, like, oh, that was so depressing. Okay. So we have to lock the doors. These are essentially doors into our cell's house. So you got to lock them. There are 3 different locks we can use for security. One, you can have a key. This is pretty easy. But in the body, we're going to use a chemical. So you're going to have a chemical key. This is called a ligand gated channel. Opens up, it allows things to come in. All right, so in this case, remember what we had on the outside of the muscle cell? We had something that bound to the muscle cell that opened up the sodium channels. Remember what that was? That was acetylcholine. It's a chemical. These are usually neurotransmitters that are going to bind to it. Neurotransmitters transmitting the neurological message from the end of the neuron. All right. Then the next way, if you've ever gone to a hospital, or maybe you're not in a great neighborhood and you're going somewhere, you wave hi to somebody through a window and they push a button and it goes bang and the door opens. That is an electrical gate. That is a voltage gated channel. Now, voltage gated channels, what do? They open when the inside of the voltage of the cell changes. What does that mean? Well, if you take a cell, like a neuron, and we put a voltmeter into it, we stab it and we look and it measures how negative or how positive it is, how many negative versus positive ions there are inside of it, this is going to give us a charge of negative 70. Why is it so negative? There are giant proteins that live inside the cell, and those are negative. And they are so big that they cannot get through the membrane, and we don't have channels to get them in and out. So they just stay in there and they keep it at negative 70. So imagine if the temperature of your house was negative 70 for a second. This door is going to stay closed at that point in time. But if we want to open it, there's a sign on it that says, if it gets to negative 55 in here, I'm going to open a door. So when the voltage gets, the doors are set to a specific voltage of the cell. And if the voltage changes, the doors may open or close, depending on what the voltage of the cell changes. And then we can change, yes, we can change the inside of a cell's voltage by either letting out ions or letting in ions. That'll change the voltage of the cell. If the voltage changes, those channels open up. Now, my last one is going to be a mechanically gated channel. So if you think about this, it's like the gate in your backyard of a fence. Have you ever gone through a fence? Sometimes they have like little clicky things that you click and it'll open up. It's a mechanical gate. That's like this. It's mechanical energy opens it up. So for example, you'll find these on a lot of sensory neurons. So I have a lot of sensory neurons in my skin. Remember sensory neurons, when they turn on, they send signals up to the brain about what's going on in the environment. Imagine this one is a touch neuron. What's going to happen is when something touches us, it's going to put pressure on it and it's going to deform this protein so that this opens up and it's going to allow our pizza in. So then we name the channel by two things, just two. It's named by how it's gated, how it's locked. It's also named by what goes through it. So our first example, it was a sodium channel that goes through it. Well, it only lets sodium in. And it also is locked by a ligand, which is a chemical key. So it is a ligand-gated sodium channel. All those words tell you something. If we have a calcium channel that is voltage gated, you can have sodium channels that are voltage gated. You can have chloride channels that are voltage gated, I think, maybe. Hopefully I'm telling you the right thing. If the voltage changes to what that is set to, there's like a setting on the door that says, if you get to this voltage, I will open up. If it is a voltage gated channel that allows calcium through, it is a voltage gated calcium channel. If it is a sodium channel, it's a voltage-gated sodium channel. So it's named for those two things. This is a mechanically gated pizza channel. All right, hopefully that gets us to where we need to go. Now, let's discuss what happens at the synapse, because this is important too. All right, what is the synapse? So we've got, let's just do the muscle here because we just did this last chapter. And hopefully you've got a good understanding of it. If not, this may clarify it. So this is our neuromuscular junction. Neuromuscular junction. It is the synapse, and all a synapse means is where a nerve gets right up to a muscle organ or gland. In this case, this is called an electrochemical synapse. Why is that? Well, what do nerves, how do they send their signals? They send them through bioelectricity, right? That flow of ions. So this flow of ions is taking information from the brain and it's going all the way down, it's traveling all the way down. Now we're about to hit the muscle. Sodium's like, hey, we got a message. We got a message. We got a message for the muscle. We got a message. We're going to tell the muscle what to do. We're going to tell it what to do. And it hits right here. And it's like, but wait, I can't cross over here. And it gets really depressed because it wanted to jump the gap. There are things that their job is to jump this gap, and they are chemicals. Those are that are going to transmit the neurological message. Those are neurological neurotransmitters. So in this case, what are these? These are ACH, right? These are ACH. So now the sodium comes down and it signals the acetylcholine to get released. It goes into the cleft, binds to what type of channel is this? This is a ligand gated sodium channel. It's going to bind to it. It's going to open it up. It's going to allow sodium to come in. And the muscle contraction magic is going to happen that we all know from the previous chapter. If you don't, we will review it. So you have sodium that is going to travel down. Now, I don't know if I want to get into this just yet. We're going to skip a step here. There's a step here with a channel, but don't worry, we will come back to it. Okay, so everybody, hopefully you've got all that up to this point. You're keeping this all in your noodle. If you haven't, go back to make sure that you get it. Okay, so now let's get to the whole nerve here. All right, so we need to get sodium into this to create an electrical current so that it will release acetylcholine to bind to the receptor or release its neurotransmitter. The question becomes, where is sodium? Where do we normally find it? Well, if you go to the hospital and you get yourself an IV, what do they usually give you? Do they give you Dasani water or Aquafina? Aquafina's trash, right? Deer Park, if you're in New York, Poland Springs, right? You guys come down here and you're like, you guys don't have any Poland Springs or whatever that water is up there? Florida tap water is a little different. Sodium chloride. That is what makes up our interstitial fluid and our blood. So surrounding all of your cells, you're going to have a high level of sodium surrounding all of your cells. These are your electrolytes, right? That's why you drink Gatorade and not just water. This is why why you can get muscle cramps if you have poor electrolytes. So they are bathed in sodium. Where do we need to get the sodium? Inside the neuron. But what's the problem here is that sodium is charged. Why is that a problem? Because it can't pass through the cell membrane. So how do we get that to work? Well, we have a sodium channel. But I live in South Florida. You don't keep your doors unlocked, right? You got to lock them. So how is this locked? This is going to be locked by either a ligand-gated channel or a mechanically gated channel, as we discussed as like a sensory nerve. So we're going to go with ligand at this point right now because this is a motor neuron. Now, nerves can either be turned on or off. This is in the off state right now. This is in the off state. Sodium's on the outside, and what's on the inside? Potassium. So that brings us to resting membrane potential. And I know the question that you may be asking is, Professor, you said it was negative inside, but there's positive potassiums. Potassium is insignificant compared to all of the negative proteins in there, so it overshadows it and makes it more negative. Yes, there are positive people at that party, but imagine if you had like 10 positive people and you had like 1,000 negative people. That party, they're still going to be like, I hate everything. The weather sucks. The food's terrible. And you got the 10 like positive people like, I thought it was pretty good here, right? Still overwhelmingly negative party. So you've got high sodium on the outside, low sodium on the inside. Where does it want to go? It wants to go in. It can't because of the cell membrane. We have to have a channel. Channel's locked. What do we need to get sodium in? We need a ligand. All right, cool, like a neurotransmitter. So we have another nerve here that's going to release the neurotransmitter. And what's that going to do? That is going to allow sodium to start creeping in. Why? It wants to go in. It's like Black Friday, Walmart. Like all the shoppers are sitting out. Open. Come on, open. I'm going to run over somebody to get a toaster for $1 less. You know, everybody wants to get in. And so they open the back door with a ligand and the sodium just starts creeping in. Now, What about the voltage inside the cell? -70, right? -70. Now, if it is -70 inside of a cell, and you start, and it's a negative party, but we start letting positive people slip into our party, what's going to happen to this -70? Look at that. It's going to be -69. And then it's going to get to -68. And I'm going to skip the next one because I don't want anybody saying it because I've got a 6 and 8-year-old and I'm so tired of hearing it. If you don't know what I mean, God bless you for not knowing. If you do, hopefully you can commiserate with me. We're going to go 6, 6. Eventually, this sodium leaking in is eventually going to make it positive until it gets to a certain threshold. And that threshold, that magic number, is -55. Now, what is our goal here? We need to get a massive amount of sodium in. So how do we do that? That is going to be right here. At the magic point, the axon hillock. Now, what is here? Can anyone guess? If you've been following along, you may be able to guess what might be here. There's a certain specific type of sodium channels. This is the front door of Walmart or Best Buy. Tons of doors to let everybody in. So what is there? That is going to be a sodium channel, but what type? It's going to be a voltage gated. There's a bunch of voltage gated channels there. And what are they set to? What do they turn to? If you look on the sign, it says, when do I open this? -55. All right. So when it gets to -55, all of these channels are going to blast open, and sodium is like, hey, we're going to run over everybody and trample people for TVs. Sodium's going to come in, and then it's going to go down until it eventually gets to the axon terminal, and it's going to cause the release of acetylcholine. That is your action potential. Once this happens, once you hit -55, that's the threshold to have it blast open. That is the action potential nerve signal. Back here, when you're having this little sodium creep in like that, and it's just kind of going up a little bit and a little bit and a little bit, that is what is known as your local potential or your graded potential. That happens in your dendrites and your somas. The action potential happens on the axons. That's a lot. That is a lot. I understand that. That's why we're going to do it again. So shake it off. Take a deep breath. Let's do this again. And then we're going to do it again. All right, ultimately, what is our goal here? Our goal is to get release of a neurotransmitter from a neuron so that it can effectuate, I don't even know if that's a word, it can affect your muscles, glands, organs, another nerve. It can somehow communicate that. And it does that through neurotransmitters. We need to release those neurotransmitters from the terminal bouton. What is the signal to do that? That rush of sodium. There's a magic step that we didn't talk about right here. I'll get back to at the end. But just know sodium comes down. It's like, hey, we got a message. And it wants to jump over the gap, but it can't. So we're going to have these guys, they're going to base jump. They got their parachutes on. They're like, okay, we're going to go over to the other side. And then they jump out. And they tell by binding to the receptor on the muscle, gland, organ. So we need to get sodium inside. Where is sodium most of the time? Sodium is on the outside of our neurons, on the outside of all of our cells, on most of our cells. We have a high level of sodium that's just bathing it. The Walmart shoppers, they're sitting outside. They want to get in. Hasn't opened yet. Okay? So sodium's high on the outside, low on the inside. If it's high on the outside, low on the inside, which way does sodium want to go? It wants to go into the cell. But it can't because the stupid cell membrane's blocking it. So how does it get in? It's got to open a door or channel. So we have a sodium channel right here. How is this sodium channel locked? It is a ligand-gated channel. So we look at the lock and say, how do we open this? We got to get a key. So what's the key is going to be another neurotransmitter. So we're going to get a neurotransmitter that's released from this neuron. It's going to bind to this channel. It's going to open it up. Now what happens? Sodium starts to creep in. The inside of the neuron, what's it at? -70 because of all of those big anions in there. And it starts getting more positive in voltage, more positive in voltage. More sodium is coming in. Party is getting to be more positive, getting to be more positive. Until what? Until it hits the magic number of negative 55. When it hits negative 55, that is called threshold. And what is that? On the axon hillock, you have a massive amount of sodium channels. These are the front doors of Walmart that are going to allow the sodium to come in. But are they ligand? No, they are voltage. Remember voltage, when the voltage inside of the cell changes from negative 70 to negative 55. If you looked at this door right here, the doors on the inside for the employee says, hey, negative 55, open. This door is set to open at negative 55. It's an automatic door, as soon as it opens. Then what happens is Black Friday, Walmart shoppers, everybody rushes in like crazy. Tons of sodium goes down the channel until it gets to the end and it tells the acetylcholine, the dopamine, the serotonin, any neurotransmitter, and tells it to go out to affect, saying that word again, to affect whatever organ that it is synapsed with. That is an action potential. Well, that's half of an action potential. Remember, action potential is once it gets to here, and once that goes, it goes, it's never coming back. The local potential happens at the dendrites and the neurons. That's like slow creeping up. Now, what happens is if you don't get to negative 55, this just goes back down to resting potential. It's not all or nothing. It can go back down. This, for an example of this, is this was a sensory neuron, and you weren't paying attention. You had a bug that was just sitting on you. It didn't give enough stimulus to get it, like not enough sodium got in from that stimulus to be able to get it to negative 55, and it flew off. And you never noticed that the neuron did not fire to go up to the brain. All right, now let's look at that in terms of a chart here. Let me get a good chart. Hold on. Let's make this bigger. Here we go. There we go. That's much bigger. All right, so this is the voltage. Obviously, it goes, this is negative to positive, and this is the time. So now, if we look at the voltage, this is our resting state. The nerve is not firing. Nothing is happening. Sodium's on the outside, potassium's on the inside. We're going to talk about potassium in a second. So now we got to put some words in here. So I don't like this chart. I would put the stimulus back here. And it would be, so what would happen is we would get a stimulus. But say a bug has now gotten on us. And now we haven't noticed it yet. It's crawling on us. And it has opened a mechanically gated channel now. So sodium is just kind of creeping in. And now what's happening is that slow rush of sodium through the dendrite. It's creeping through the soma. It's getting higher and higher. It's getting more positive in there until it hits here at negative 55. What happens at negative 55? All of those voltage gated sodium channels are now open. All those Walmart shoppers rush in. You see how long it took that sodium, like just creeping through the dendrites and the somas to get to from 70 negative 55? Look how fast it goes from negative 55 to 40. That is so much sodium is influxing. This is called depolarization. Now, what does polarization mean? Polarizing is when one person is on one side, one person is on the other side. So, or a group of people are on one side and a group of people on the other side. So, what is that? Like, I'm not being political. I'm just saying our modern political environment, most people one side or the other, very few people that are just kind of in the middle. Pineapple on pizza is one of those things. It's either you're on this side or you're on this side. There aren't many people that are like, yeah, take it or leave it. Some people are like, that doesn't belong on it. Some people are like, oh, I love it. Mayonnaise. Some people, a sandwich isn't a sandwich without mayo on it. Some people say it comes straight from the devil's butt. That's what polarization means. In this case, we have sodium on one side, but not on the other. We have potassium on one side and not on the other. We're very polarized. So what happens when you depolarize something is the sodium is going on both sides. You're depolarizing it. We're coming together in the middle. That happens all the way up until you get to positive 40. Now, what happens here? It doesn't go up anymore. So how would you stop this process from happening? How would you stop a nerve from getting more positive on the inside? Well, we just let all these positive people in the door. Let's go lock that door. So on these voltage gated channels, there's also another setting on them that says close close at positive or positive 40. So at positive 40, this closes. So it can't get any more positive. Now you get repolarization. So repolarization would kind of insinuate that you would be what? So how would you make it's getting more negative, right? It's going back to negative 70. How would you do that? Well, if you looked at your party and you're like, look at all these positive sodiums in here, you, you just kick them out, right? But why did sodium come in the first place? Came in the first place because of that gradient, right? That massive gradient. There's no gradient there anymore. Sodium's on both sides. So I'm happy here. I'm not leaving. So who raises their hand? Who wants to leave the party? What positive wants to leave? Well, remember the inside of our cells have a ton of potassium in them. We're going to talk about that in a second. So there's a ton of potassium on the inside of our neurons. There isn't so much on the outside. So where does it want to go? It wants to leave the cell. But same thing, it's positive, it's charged, it can't pass through the membrane. So we've got another voltage gated channel right here. What do voltage gated channels do? They're set to a certain voltage. This one is set to positive 40. Open at 40. So it opens at 40. And then what happens? See you later, potassium. Potassium rushes out. You're losing positives. It gets you to be more negative, and actually it overshoots it to negative 90. This is so that you can't like recreate that same stimulus right away. My aunt, I don't know if this works, if this gets this in your head. My aunt's a nurse. She used to give us lots of our shots when we were a kid. And the way that she would do it, she'd come up to you and she'd go, and she'd slap you on the arm and she'd stick the needle in right away. I think about this when I think of this. If she slapped that neuron and you had the action potential fire, and then she stuck you with the needle right in here, are you going to be able to feel that needle? No. I don't know if that's that. I don't think that's true. But if it gets you to like think about it, like that's what this why it overshoots it, because this is much harder to fire now. Because instead of going from negative 70 to 55, now you got to go from negative 90 to 55. It's going to take a way bigger stimulus. It's like sometimes when you eat something really sweet, you can't taste, like if you're drinking a soda, you're not going to be able to taste something that's as sweet as if you weren't eating it. Like that's already been stimulated. Like it's harder to get those sweet receptors to fire off again. Then what happens is we have leak channels that are going to leak things in and out, but then we also have what is called the sodium potassium pump. Going to come right back to this. Okay, so just to review again, what do we got? We've got the original stimulus. So in this case here, we've got a neurotransmitter that binds to this ligand gated channel. It opens up and sodium starts creeping in a little bit until it hits what? Negative 55. What happens here? The voltage gated channels open on the axon hillock, which allows a mass influx of sodium. That's why it goes up so fast. That is called depolarization when you get the sodium rushing in. It hits positive 40. What happens? Sodium channels close. Those voltage gated sodium channels also have a close number on it. Close at positive 40. But the potassium channels, they also have a voltage gated channel that says open at 40. And potassium's like, here's my chance. And it's like my dog. As soon as you open the door, see ya. And it repolarizes. Now, after the refractory period, what's going to happen is you're going to have the sodium potassium pumps taking sodium and throwing it out, pumping it out like a pump, like you've taken on water, like pump all this sodium out, like you're out watering your boat. And you're like, get that potassium back in here. And you're pumping potassium back in. And you have to create that gradient. This is an artificially created gradient so that we can get this to happen. That is the whole job of the resting membrane potential. So let's look at the resting membrane potential. If we look here, this is the resting state of our neuron at negative 70. I like to call this a salty banana. You got a salty banana. So what do bananas have in them? Lots of potassium on the inside. Not so much on the outside. Where does potassium want to go? It wants to leave the banana. We've got a salt. We put salt on it. Where does salt want to go? Or where does sodium want to go? It wants to go to the inside. We also have chloride out here, and we also have calcium out here. This is maintained by the sodium-potassium pump. Why is it a pump? Because it has to pump things against their concentration gradient. You're pumping sodium from the inside out to where it is highly concentrated, from where it is low concentrated to high concentrated. That takes energy. We have to pump the potassium back in from where it is low. It is low on the outside and high on the inside. That takes energy. Your brain consumes about 20% of the glucose that you ingest. For the size of your brain, for the organ, that's a lot of glucose because it requires so much energy. Why does it require so much energy? Most of it is maintaining this resting membrane potential. That's why you feel like a crazy person when you don't eat. I am the worst. I get hangry. Like I get mad at everybody. Everybody's a bad driver. The person in front of me is going too slow. Stop talking to me. And then I eat something. I'm like, I'm so sorry. It's because your brain, that resting membrane potential starts you're not getting enough energy up to your brain. That's why strokes, right? Like in an eruption of blood to your brain, it doesn't survive very well because it has so much energy that it needs. And part of it is due to this, is maintaining this resting membrane potential. All right, last thing that we'll do. Just real quick, we get a channel that opens either ligand or mechanically gated, depending on if it's a motor or sensory or an interneuron. It opens, sodium comes in, local potential increases until it hits -55. Voltage gated channels open. When it hits -55, mass amounts of sodium rush in. It gets down to the terminal bouton and it causes release of the neurotransmitter. Now, how does it cause the release of a neurotransmitter? This is really important. I didn't want to confuse you earlier because sometimes you start throwing in things. How are the neurotransmitters released from these vesicles? With calcium. Calcium binds to this and it helps it bind to the cell membrane and it releases it. So where is calcium though? Calcium is high on the outside of our cells, low on the inside. So where does it want to go? It wants to go in. Can't go in because of the cell membrane, so we have to have a channel. That is a calcium channel there. How would you suspect that this calcium channel opens? Is it going to be a voltage? Is it going to be a mechanical? Is it going to be a ligand? Well, we've got a rush of positive ions coming in. What do you think that's going to do to this -70 that's down here as it starts to collect? Yeah, it's going to start to get more positive. So this calcium channel is a voltage-gated channel. And when it hits, let's just say -55, let's open that calcium channel door, influx of calcium, neurotransmitter release. And it will go and affect organ, muscle, gland, other neuron. Those are the steps in an action potential. You should know the most that you need to take away from this, though. The steps, not super important, but what you do need to know are the 3 types of channels that we have and how they open. You should know about the resting membrane potential, salty banana. And you should also know that the resting membrane or the local potential or graded potential, as they're called, happens in the dendrites and the soma, and an action potential happens down the axon. I know that was a lot. Try to rewind, go back and forth. If you have any questions, let me know.